Israel ramps up its strikes on Gaza City after new offensive plan. And Australia to recognise a Palestinian state at the United Nations in September. That and more coming up on AWANI International. Today, areas east of Gaza City are reporting the heaviest bombardments in weeks. The intensified strikes come hours after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a new offensive in the enclave, which he expects to end quickly. On Sunday, Netanyahu's office confirmed that he spoke to US President Donald Trump, discussing plans to seize Hamas strongholds, free hostages, and end the war. Israel's Security Cabinet recently approved a plan to take control of Gaza City, marking a significant escalation in the conflict. The airstrikes on Monday targeted residential suburbs, causing displacement among civilians. Among the strikes was a missile that hit a tent used by journalists at the Al-Shifa hospital compound, killing 6 people, including prominent Al Jazeera correspondent Anas al-Sharif. Israel's military claims al-Sharif was a Hamas cell leader disguised as a reporter, an allegation the United Nations Special Rapporteur says lacks evidence. Australia will recognise a Palestinian state at next month's United Nations General Assembly. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced the move, joining France, the UK and Canada in increasing international pressure on Israel. Albanese said the decision follows commitments from the Palestinian Authority to exclude Hamas from any future state, reform governance, demilitarize and hold elections. He said the recognition was further prompted by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's expansion of illegal settlements, threats of annexation in the occupied territories, and a rejection of a two-state solution. Meanwhile, New Zealand Foreign Minister Winston Peters said his country would consider recognition in the coming month. Palestine is currently recognized by 147 of the UN's 193 member states and holds permanent observer state status, allowing participation but no voting rights. We'll be back with more after the break. Stay tuned.
Ayah pergi cari rezeki untuk awak dulu, okey?
Dia bukan kakak saya,
Albi ceraikan Bila, kahwin dengan anak saya.
Ini adalah keputusan yang terbaik.
Saya tak boleh kahwin dengan Farah. Sekarang ni anak saya dengan Bila ada dekat dalam rahim Farah, ya kan?
Ibu tumpang itu haram.
Malu je lah.
Saya akan suruh Farah gugurkan kandungan dia.
Mandul bukan pilihan. Isnin hingga Khamis, 10 malam di Astro Ria dan Astro Go.
Ada yang perdebatan bahawa GST perlu dikembalikan semula kerana ada yang mempertikaikan bahawa SST itu tidak efektif.
Isu buruh kanak-kanak bukan sahaja dalam bentuk fizikal tetapi juga bentuk moden yang lebih licik dan juga terselindung.
Kita tengok buruh kanak-kanak dan ada juga buruh paksa kanak-kanak.
Perkumpulan FB dikenali sebagai grup budak-budak sekolah rendah yang didakwa menyebarkan gambar remaja perempuan tidak senonoh telah pun ditutup.
Welcome back. As the Israeli cabinet approves a plan to take control of Gaza City, famine is silently unfolding in the Strip. UN-backed Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, warns of a worsening crisis amid restricted aid access and rising hunger-related deaths. Dr. Fauzia Muhammad Hassan, with her extensive on-ground experience, describes the rapidly deteriorating conditions in Gaza.
We see every day, every moment, these keratinized pictures or images of babies or living babies with just skeleton and with bulging stomach, women, elderly, daily, and that really pains and bring tears to many of our people who still have some humanity in their hearts. And when I speak to some of my friends, they actually told me and they showed me the pictures of them and their children wasting away. Many has reported that they have lost 30, 40 kg. So UNICEF, according to UNICEF, 70,000 children under 5 and 17,000 pregnant women and breastfeeding need or require treatment for their malnutrition. And in July last month alone, 20,000 children were hospitalized in the hospital for the treatment of starvation and malnutrition. But you know, the hospitals in Gaza is barely functioning with barely medication because all the stores are depleted. You see in Sydney, from the south and from the north, you name any cities, big cities in Norway, in UK, in France, in Germany, they are all demonstrating, expressing their anger about this starvation that is happening in Gaza. So some countries maybe wants to dampen the anger, they start airdropping. Airdropping is not a safe method of delivering aid, and we know there are some people already dead being hit by the parcel that is being airdropped. And it is expensive. And it is inadequate. So what a waste resources that we have. It is very easy. Just open the border. And we know many kilometers, thousands of trucks has been waiting outside the border many, many months, carrying the aid that is basically needed.
The United States remains firmly committed to securing a ceasefire in Gaza, says U.S. Ambassador to Malaysia, Edgar Kagan. He says President Donald Trump is actively involved in efforts to stop the violence, but points to Hamas for not taking concrete steps towards halting hostilities.
I think that what we see is the U.S. is firmly committed to trying to bring a ceasefire to Gaza. The president has been very engaged on this. I think that we've been disappointed that Hamas hasn't been willing to take more meaningful steps to try and bring about a ceasefire. And I think that we are encouraged by the fact that 22 Arab countries have publicly called on Hamas to disarm and to surrender power in Gaza, recognizing that this is a critical step necessary to bring peace to Gaza and allow the significant inflow of humanitarian assistance.
U.S. President Donald Trump expresses hope that China will quadruple its soybean orders from the U.S. In a post on Truth Social, he says that this is a way of substantially reducing Beijing's trade deficit with Washington. A tariff truce between the two countries is due to expire on August 12th, though the Trump administration has signaled the deadline could be extended. China buys more than 60% of soybeans shipped worldwide, sourced mainly from Brazil and the U.S. Last year, it imported roughly 105 million metric tons, just under a quarter from the US and most of the remainder from Brazil. Quadrupling US shipments would require China to source most of its soybeans from American suppliers. In recent years, China has reduced reliance on US soybeans, favoring South American suppliers instead. Amid ongoing trade tensions, China has yet to buy any US soybeans for the fourth quarter, raising concerns ahead of the US harvest export season. United States Vice President J.D. Vance believes a Russia-Ukraine settlement is unlikely to satisfy either side and claims that both will remain unhappy. He also says it will not be productive for Russian President Vladimir Putin to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky before first speaking with U.S. President Donald Trump. He added that Washington aimed for a settlement acceptable to both countries, even if neither side was fully satisfied. On Friday, Trump announced he would meet Putin in Alaska on August 15th to discuss ending the war. Trump said Russia and Ukraine were close to a ceasefire agreement that could end a 3.5-year-old conflict. He indicated the deal might require Ukraine to surrender significant territory. A day later, Zelensky said Ukraine could not violate its constitution on territorial matters. In an earlier interview, Vance confirmed that the US was arranging talks between Putin, Zelensky and Trump. He explained that scheduling remained a challenge as the goal was to bring all three leaders to the same table. Amid growing tensions in the South China Sea, China's Coast Guard says it took measures to expel Philippine vessels from the Scarborough Shoal. According to them, its forces monitored and intercepted the vessels after warnings are ignored before forcing them away in a lawful operation. The Philippine embassy in Beijing did not respond to requests for comment. On the same day, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. said Beijing had misinterpreted his recent comments on Taiwan. He explained that Manila would likely be drawn into any China-Taiwan conflict because of its proximity to the island. China accused him of playing with fire after his remarks during a visit to India. Marcos said there was no way the Philippines could stay out of such a conflict. In other news, chip giants Nvidia and Advanced Micro Devices, or AMD, have agreed to pay the US government 15% of revenue from their sales to China. According to the Financial Times, this move is part of an arrangement with the Trump administration to secure export licenses for semiconductors.
US officials said Nvidia will share 15% of sales from its H2O chips in China, while AMD will do the same for its MI308 chips. The Trump administration has yet to decide how the funds will be used. Sales of H2O chips to China were halted in April, but the US recently allowed Nvidia to resume deliveries, with the Commerce Department now issuing licenses. AMD's MI308 chips are also covered under the agreement. When asked about the revenue-sharing deal, Nvidia said they follow rules the US government sets for their participation in worldwide markets. Officials stressed that the sales will not compromise national security, though details on the agreement's implementation remain unclear. China is a key market for both companies. Nvidia earned $17 billion from China in its last fiscal year, 13% of total revenue, while AMD made $6.2 billion in 2024, accounting for 24% of its sales.
Senior Chinese diplomat Liu Jianchao, seen as a potential foreign minister, has reportedly been taken away for questioning. Sources say he was detained after returning from trips to Singapore, South Africa and Algeria, which ended on July 30th.
In July at the Tsinghua University Forum, Liu expressed optimism about US-China relations. He said it was unimaginable that the two nations would ever go to war. Liu was known for frequent overseas trips, unlike his lower-profile predecessors. Foreign diplomats praised his confident manner, fluent English and spontaneous engagement without prepared notes. Another diplomat said his aides were confident he would soon become foreign minister. In 2024, he made a high-profile trip to the United States, seen as a trial run for the foreign minister role. During that visit, he met several counterparts, including then Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
Meanwhile, the Indian government expects around 55% of its merchandise exports to the US will be subject to President Donald Trump's tariffs. It says the Department of Commerce is engaging with all stakeholders for feedback and to assess the current situation.
Trump imposed an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods last week in response to India's purchases of Russian oil, bringing the total duty to 50%. Government estimates show goods trade between the US and India total $87 billion in the last fiscal year. US-based multinationals are now facing boycott calls in India as business executives and supporters of Prime Minister Narendra Modi stoke anti-American sentiment in protest against the tariffs. Modi had made a special appeal for self-reliance on Sunday, telling a gathering in Bengaluru that Indian technology companies made products for the world, but now was the time to prioritize the country's needs.
That report wraps up AWANI International for tonight. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more and be sure to follow our social media accounts. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and good night.